Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Now guys, I realize I am a little bit late to the party, but back earlier this month, around the 6th of the month if I recall, Canon made a new announcement and they announced that they were coming out with a 5ds as well as a 5ds-R, and they also announced two new Canon Rebels. They announced the T6i and the T6s. Now, I have been delaying in making this video just because I've been kind of busy testing other things. You guys will be seeing a couple of review videos I've been working on recently come up. And so yeah, I've just been kind of busy with a lot of different things. But I didn't want to ignore this because I've been waiting on Canon to come up with some new equipment for a long time now. And so this announcement actually got me very, very excited. As you guys may already know, I am a Nikon user, but seeing Canon come out with some new things is exciting as well because all the camera companies compete with each other, and when they compete, ultimately we all win, regardless of whether we're using Nikon, Canon, or Sony, or Pentax, or anything. You know, it all benefits us all in the long run. Now, the interesting thing is, with Canon, we've had a lot of cameras that were in that 20 megapixel range, you know, in that 18 to 22 megapixel range for quite a while. But the thing is, with this 5DS and 5DS-R, they have now gone up to a 50.6 megapixel sensor. So that actually is the highest resolution 35 millimeter based DSLR ever. You know, it definitely goes beyond what we get out of the 36 megapixel Nikon D800 and D810. The thing that's interesting too about this is that this is not really a replacement for any camera in Canon. Very much how whenever Nikon came out with the D800, it was not necessarily, even though it's the closest replacement for D700, it was not exactly a complete replacement for it. It was kind of, in a lot of ways, a completely new product line. And that's kind of what we see here. This camera is not a replacement for the 5D Mark III. There's actually still a forthcoming 5D Mark IV, and that's evidenced by the fact that that on this new camera, even though it has this new 50 megapixel sensor, it actually subtracts a few video features that we even had on the 5D Mark III. For example, it doesn't have an uncompressed HDMI out for video, and it does not have a headphone jack either, so it is not designed for video. This is a camera that's designed for photographers that want to primarily shoot landscapes and shoot in studios and things like that, that are shooting with maximum resolution in mind. So that's something that's interesting. The other thing too that's interesting is the fact that we don't see dual pixel CMOS AF on this camera either. So once again, you know, we don't have that fast video autofocus, and that's something that I do think will come on a 5D Mark IV whenever that comes out, which I expect to see that happen sometime toward, sometime probably early fall, perhaps. But anyway, so this camera is definitely not video centric. This camera does use dual Digix 6 processors, which makes sense because we're dealing with 50 megapixel files, so obviously lots of data to move around. It will be capable of shooting 5 frames per second, and that's actually not bad at all. It's certainly not a sports camera by any means, but it's certainly not bad at all when you consider that it is 50 megapixels. The 22 megapixel 5D Mark III is 6 frames a second. So this is not that much slower when you consider that it's having to push around tons more data. It appears to be the same 61-point autofocus system. It'll be interesting to see if they've made any tweaks to it. Because one thing that we saw on the Nikon D800 is that even though it had a 51 megapixel, but 51-point autofocus system from some of the previous cameras, it really, you know, wasn't ideal for dealing with a camera of that resolution. And I have a D800, and whenever they came out with the D810, I saw a very, very big difference in terms of autofocus accuracy on the 810. But anyways, that's something for another video. So it'll be interesting to see if they've actually made any improvements to this 61-point focus system to be able to be a bit more precise to deal with a higher resolution. Let's see, what else do we have here? A little bit less ISO range, 100 to 6400 ISO. and it is expandable up to 12,800 and down to ISO 50. So, you know, once again, not designed for high ISO shooting. And let's see, 3.2-inch LCD screen. It is over 1 million dots. That's nice. And it also has this new Canon flicker mode, which is something that we first saw on the 7D Mark II. And yes, guys, I know I've kind of skipped over that camera, but the video on that is coming, I promise. But this new flicker mode basically allows the camera to delay its shutter actuations to deal with flickering light sources. So if you're shooting under fluorescent lights or those nasty sodium vapor lights or anything like that, the camera delays its shutter release, so that way you don't get that nasty banding and things like that in your images. So pretty cool there. Dual memory card slots. You'd certainly better get yourself some large cards. I would recommend 64 gig cards for this one, especially if you're going to be shooting RAW. HDR built in. That's something that we can expect from this point. This camera does have some crop mode, so that's nice. We have a 1.3 and 1.6 crop mode. Totally makes sense for this type of camera. If you do need to get a little bit more reach out of your lenses, you know, you can still have the crop mode and be able to take advantage of getting a bit more reach, but still have quite a bit of resolution. Let's see, in-camera HDR. All in all, it looks like a very, very good camera. Of course, USB 3, as you'd expect. Obviously, big files, USB 3 makes a lot of sense. You definitely want to have the most transfer speed you can possibly get your hands on. And something else that's interesting about this is, earlier I mentioned that there is a 5ds and a 5dsR. Now, this is basically akin to whenever Nikon came up with the D800, we had a D800 and then we had a D800E. And the E was missing the optical low-pass filter, or anti-aliasing filter as it's sometimes referred to. And basically that should give us some sharper images whenever we are using that R model. We'll just have to see how much sharper. It seems that you get about a 10% sharper image or so with the D800E versus the D800. I am a little bit surprised that Canon didn't just go the route of something like a Nikon D810 and just say, okay, you know, there's not going to be an AA filter at all on this camera model at all, and as opposed to giving us a separate one with a filter and a separate model without a filter. But I do know that on the D810, Nikon, their processing got a little bit more advanced on that generation of camera, and apparently they included some more ray suppression in the new processor also. So perhaps Canon's processing hasn't gotten to that point. I'm not sure. But anyways, for whatever reason, they decided to offer us two different models. And obviously, we're going to be testing this whenever it comes out. Let's see, what else? With this camera, Canon also came out with a new lens called the 11-24, which certainly looks promising also. And I am definitely eager to test that alongside my Nikon 14-24. Now, 11-14 may not sound like a big difference, but on the wide end, that is a huge difference. So I am very excited about this lens. That lens is going to be going for $3,000 USD. Pretty steep, but I mean, it is very revolutionary. Apparently, its front element is the largest of that particular type. It's 87 millimeters in diameter, so it's going to be a massive lens. So yeah, I can understand why it has a very high price tag. It's going to be a very specialty item. As far as the 5DS and 5DSR are concerned, where did our price tag on that run off to? The R is a little bit more expensive than the non-R. What video options does it have, by the way? And yes, once again, in video, it's still limited to 30 frames a second in 1080. So yet another reason why I say this camera is not going to be for video. That 5D Mark IV, hopefully it'll bring all sorts of dual pixel CMOS AF and perhaps even 4K into the mix. Maybe 60 frames a second at 1080 in 1080p. But anyways, whenever that gets officially announced, we'll talk about it. Price tag. I believe the non-R is $35.99. But let's just double check ourselves here. $36.99 for the S and $38.99 for the R. Of course, both of those are body-only prices. I was actually a bit surprised at the price. I actually thought it was going to be a bit higher. Initially, I was thinking that the R would be $42.99, and I was thinking that the non-R was going to be like $39.99. So it's a bit lower than what I thought. It will be interesting to see where they price the 5D Mark IV whenever that comes along, but I suppose we just have to wait and see for that one. So all in all, very, very good camera. Some figures about dynamic range have already started to be tossed around. Apparently, there's a lot of talk about official Canon sources saying that the dynamic range will remain the same. It's not going to be in the 13 or 14 stop range like a lot of the Nikon and Sony models. Apparently, it's going to be around 11 or 12, so it'll be more similar like the 5D Mark III. This is not really confirmed yet, so we'll have to wait to see on that. But definitely something to get me excited for sure. As far as the Rebels are concerned, Canon also released two new Rebels. They released the T6i and the T6s. Now, the first thing I noticed about this is the naming. Canon kind of contradicted themselves. Actually, not kind of. They really contradicted themselves on the naming of their new Rebel. In the past, an S on a Canon camera meant that it was the higher resolution model. For example, a 1DS Mark III was 22 megapixels. But then they had the 1D series, which was the faster camera that was lower resolution. With this new 5D, it is called a 5DS, and that denotes that it is a high resolution model. So unlike a 5D Mark III that's 22 megapixels, it is a 5DS and it is 50 megapixels. So it makes sense. The new Rebels though, it doesn't make sense. And I think it's kind of ironic that they released a Rebel with this naming scheme, and then they contradicted themselves. They released the 5DS and they released the T6s, but the T6s is contradictory of what the S normally means. So on this T6s, it is actually not any higher resolution than the T6i. Both of those cameras are 24 megapixels, so you know it is a little bit newer sensor than what we've seen in that particular range of cameras in the past. They both feature the 19-point autofocus system. Now, not long ago I posted a review on the Nikon D5500, and I kind of talked about how the entry-level cameras are starting to grow up, and that's definitely something that we see on this camera also. I think I even mentioned on the 5500 review that that camera, even though it has some new and exciting features, it's not going to be it's not going to be as good as the Rebels in terms of video, and this T6i proves that, because this camera does have Canon's dual pixel CMOS autofocus. So previously that's something that we found on models like the 70D and the 70D Mark II, but now Canon is bringing that down to a lower price point. So in terms of video, without me even doing any testing, I know that the Canon is going to do much better in video in terms of autofocus than the Nikon D5500. So that's something that's very, very exciting. The other thing that's nice is Canon is now also giving us Wi-Fi on cameras on a camera at this level. And once again, before, that's something that we had to have just on the cameras like the 70D, for example. So all these features are starting to trickle down. We now have dual pixel CMOS AF, we have the 19-point autofocus system, and those are features that are straight from the 70D. So it's all kind of trickling down. So very, very exciting. We also have, let's see, what else do we have? We also have Wi-Fi built in. And this is something else that we used to have to go up to the 70D to get. Unlike the 70D and the 70D Mark II and the 6D that all offer Wi-Fi, these new Rebels have Wi-Fi that actually supports NFC as well. So that's something that's nice. So not only does it have the same features, but it's actually got a little bit more capability in that area. And let's see, what else do we have? 5 frames a second. That's about on par with everything in this range. Now, They have a T6s and a T6i, as I mentioned, and this T6s is not any higher resolution, but they do give us a few extra things. They do give us a top info screen now, and that's something that we've never had on an entry-level DSLR of any sort. Let's see, what else do we have here? We also have a sensor to be able to turn off the LCD screen whenever we're using the viewfinder. So it's going to be basically like the Sony's, and that's something that we also find on the D5500 as well. So whenever you raise the camera up to your eye, it will automatically turn off the LCD for you. And they also give us dual command dials on the T6s too, which is, I mean, that's perhaps the biggest sign that the entry-level camera segment is growing up. So we have all these features that we used to have to go up to a higher level camera for. We now have that in an entry-level body. So that's interesting. Part of me kind of wonders why Canon released two models here. I really kind of wish that they kind of kept it simple and just offered the one model with all the features as opposed to doing the separate S and I thing. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts their sales of the 70D, but that's something that we'll have to just wait on. All in all, very, very comprehensive. Let's see, what are they selling these fellows for? The T6i is going for, body only, the T6i is going for $749 USD. In a kit with the 18-135 STM lens, the T6i is going for $1099 USD. With the 18-55 STM lens, it's going for $899 USD. Of course, I'll put all these prices in the description below. And then the T6s, what are we doing on it? $849 on the body of the T6s. So, you know, 100 extra bucks there. And then we've got the 135. There isn't an 18-55 kit for the T6s, so it's only body only at $849 USD, or you can get it with the 18-135 STM for $1199 USD. With the $100 difference there, yeah, I really just kind of wish they would have kept it simple and just made them all the S's and forgot about the separate models there. But anyways, Canon's always had a bazillion Rebels, so I suppose this isn't a surprise. All in all, though, I am definitely looking forward to these cameras to actually officially be announced. Well, they've been officially announced, but I'm waiting for them to actually show up in my hands so we can give them a proper test. Definitely check back and be sure to subscribe. I will certainly be posting review videos about all these cameras whenever I get my hands on them. And let me know what you think in the comments. We have a little while before the cameras show up, so if there's anything that you'd like to see in more detail, write about it in the comments below. Let me know what you think. And oh yeah, you know, if I sound like a biased Nikon user, that's because I am. I have never proclaimed to be an unbiased reviewer. We all have our biases, but I am certainly excited to see these new Canon models come out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.